Withdraw access, the psychology of not being always available. Most people believe that being available makes them valuable. They think answering immediately shows care. They think always saying yes proves loyalty. They think staying reachable keeps relationships alive. But psychology reveals something uncomfortable. The more available you are, the less valuable you become. This is not because people are ungrateful. It is because the human mind adapts quickly to access. When access is unlimited, it loses weight. When presence is guaranteed, it stops being respected. And most people never realize this is happening until they feel drained, ignored, and taken for granted. They start asking, why do people not respect my time? Why do they disappear when I need them? Why am I always there for others, but alone when it matters? The answer is painful, but clear. You taught people that your presence requires no effort. Human beings don't value what is always available. They value what has boundaries. Every time you respond instantly, every time you rearrange your life for others, every time you make yourself emotionally accessible without limit, you send a silent message. I am always here. I am always reachable. I will always adjust. And the human mind does something predictable. It relaxes. Relaxation does not lead to appreciation. It leads to assumption. People assume you will be there. People assume you will understand. People assume you will wait. And assumption is the beginning of disrespect. This is why people often treat strangers with more courtesy than those who are always available. Because strangers have limits. This is why powerful people are rarely reachable, yet deeply respected. Because access to them is intentional, not automatic. But here is the part most people misunderstand. Withdrawing access is not punishment. It is not manipulation. It is not playing games. It is self-respect in action. When you withdraw access calmly, you are not rejecting people. You are correcting the lesson you taught them. You are saying, my time matters. My energy is limited. My presence is not free. And the human mind responds to that clarity immediately. This video is not about becoming cold. It is not about ignoring people. It is not about disappearing dramatically. It is about understanding one psychological truth. People treat you based on how easily they can reach you, not how much you explain yourself. When you are always available, you train people to postpone you. When you delay responses, people become more attentive. When you stop overgiving, people begin to measure their effort. When you withdraw access, you force awareness. Awareness changes behavior. This is why people suddenly respect you when you stop explaining yourself. This is why people check their tone when they are no longer sure you will stay. This is why people value your presence once it is no longer guaranteed. But here is the most important part. Withdrawing access will scare you at first because it feels like loss. It feels like abandonment. It feels like silence. But silence is not emptiness. Silence is space. And space reveals truth. It reveals who values you. It reveals who depended on convenience. It reveals who respected you and who only benefited from your availability. By the end of this video, you will understand why being always available has been quietly costing you respect. You will understand why people respond differently when access changes, why boundaries work without arguments, why selective availability creates power, and how to withdraw access without guilt or drama. This is not about changing who you are. It is about changing what people are allowed to expect from you. Because once expectations change, everything else follows. Stay with me. Because once you understand the psychology of access, you will never give it away carelessly again. Why unlimited availability destroys value. Unlimited availability feels like kindness. It feels generous. It feels loyal. It feels like you are doing the right thing. But psychology does not reward intention. It responds to patterns. And the pattern of unlimited availability sends a very specific signal to the human mind. This person has no boundaries around their time, energy, or presence. The human brain is wired to categorize value based on effort. What requires effort is valued. What requires no effort is taken for granted. This rule applies everywhere. Money, attention, relationships, time. When something is always available, the brain stops assigning importance to it. Not because it is useless, but because it is predictable. Predictability removes urgency. Urgency creates value. This is why people respect appointments more than open invitations. This is why deadlines create focus. This is why limited access creates attention. Unlimited availability removes all three. When you are always reachable, people stop planning around you. They delay responses. They cancel casually. They assume flexibility, not out of disrespect, but out of conditioning. Your behavior conditioned their expectations. Every time you replied instantly, you taught them they will wait. Every time you adjusted your schedule, you taught them they will accommodate. Every time you stayed emotionally available without limit, you taught them they will absorb. And the human mind does what it always does. It adapts. Adaptation is dangerous when it happens to your value. Because once people adapt to easy access, they no longer protect it. They don't check their tone. They don't respect timing. They don't consider impact. This is why people often feel more drained by those closest to them than by strangers. Strangers require effort. Familiar people assume access. And assumption kills appreciation. Another uncomfortable truth: unlimited availability attracts dependence, not respect. When you are always available, some people stop developing their own emotional regulation. They rely on you to listen, comfort, fix, validate. This creates imbalance. And imbalance always leads to devaluation, because respect requires equality of effort. When one person always gives and the other always receives, the receiver subconsciously lowers the giver's value, not intentionally, not maliciously, but neurologically. The brain begins to associate the giver with supply, not significance. This is why people who give endlessly are often the first to be ignored. Their presence becomes functional, not valued. Another key psychological mechanism at play here is access saturation. When people have unlimited access to you, they stop noticing you. Your messages blend into the noise. Your presence becomes background. Your effort becomes expected. This is not love. This is habituation. And habituation is the enemy of respect. This is why people often miss you only after you become unavailable. Not because they suddenly care, but because awareness returns. Scarcity restores perception. This is also why powerful individuals are rarely always reachable. They understand something instinctively. Availability without intention is self-erasure. Their access is controlled, not emotionally, not manipulatively, but deliberately. They decide who gets their time, when they are reachable, how much energy they give. And this decision alone changes how they are treated. Another painful realization: being always available does not make people closer to you. It makes them comfortable using you. Closeness requires mutual effort. Comfort requires none. When you are always there, others don't have to rise. They don't have to plan. They don't have to consider. They don't have to adjust. You do all the adjusting. And over time, this dynamic destroys polarity. Respect fades, attraction fades, attention fades, and you are left feeling, why do I feel invisible even though I give so much? Because giving without limits removes leverage, and leverage is not manipulation. Leverage is self-respect expressed through structure. The most important realization of this part is this: people don't value you less because you are kind. They value you less because your kindness has no boundaries. Unlimited availability is not love. It is emotional overexposure. And emotional overexposure always leads to devaluation. Value is not created by presence alone. It is created by presence that must be earned. How constant availability trains people to delay you. People rarely disrespect you all at once. Disrespect is learned gradually. And one of the fastest ways people learn to delay you is through constant availability. When you are always available, you unknowingly teach others something dangerous. There is no urgency here. Urgency is not created by importance. Urgency is created by uncertainty. If people are unsure whether they can reach you, they respond faster. They plan better. They show consideration. But when access is guaranteed, the nervous system relaxes. Relaxation feels safe, but safety removes priority. This is why people often reply faster to someone who responds slowly than to someone who responds instantly. It feels counterintuitive, but psychologically it makes sense. The human brain prioritizes what might be lost, not what is always present. When you reply immediately every time, you remove the possibility of loss. So people delay you without guilt. They think, I'll respond later, they'll understand, they're always there anyway. And later slowly becomes habit. Another critical mechanism at play is time hierarchy. Everyone ranks people subconsciously based on how much effort is required to access them. High effort access, just high priority. Low effort access, sure, low priority. When you make yourself easy to access, you slide down the hierarchy, even if you are kind, intelligent, or supportive. This is not about worth, it is about perceived demand. People assume if this person is always available, their time must not be very valuable. This assumption is rarely conscious, but it is powerful. And once it forms, behavior follows. This is why people start responding hours later, canceling without apology, rescheduling casually, multitasking while talking to you, not because they dislike you, but because your availability trained them that there would be no consequence. Another painful truth: constant availability removes anticipation. Anticipation is what creates presence. When someone has to wait for your response, they are mentally engaged. When there is no waiting, engagement disappears. Your messages become background noise. Your calls become interruptions. Your presence becomes expected. This is why some people feel more seen by those who are less available. Because attention follows anticipation. Another psychological effect of constant availability is emotional dilution. When you are always emotionally reachable, others stop regulating themselves. They dump emotions on you. They vent without limits. They rely instead of relating. This turns you into an emotional utility, not a respected presence. Utility is used, presence is valued, and value is what changes behavior. Another key point: people delay you because delaying you feels safe. They know you won't leave, they know you won't withdraw, they know you won't change behavior. Safety removes accountability. This is why people often respect boundaries more than kindness without structure. Boundaries introduce consequence. Consequence introduces awareness. Awareness changes behavior. Constant availability removes all three. And once people learn they can delay you, they apply that lesson everywhere. They delay responses. They delay commitments. They delay respect. And eventually they delay you as a person. The most important realization of this part is this: people don't delay you because you are unimportant. They delay you because your availability taught them that delay has no cost. When delay has no cost, it becomes default behavior. This is why withdrawing access feels uncomfortable at first. You are changing a lesson that has already been learned. And unlearning always creates resistance. But resistance is temporary. Recalibration is permanent. Once access is no longer guaranteed, people adjust quickly. They respond faster. They become more intentional. They treat your time with more care. Not because you asked them to, but because behavior forced awareness. Why being always available attracts the wrong people. Not everyone is drawn to your kindness for the right reasons. Some people are drawn to availability, not connection. This distinction is critical. When you are always available, you don't just become convenient, you become attractive to the wrong type of people. People who are emotionally disciplined respect boundaries. People who lack discipline search for those without them. And constant availability is a signal. It tells emotionally unregulated people, this person will always answer. This person will always listen. This person will always adjust. These individuals are not necessarily evil, but they are often emotionally needy, validation dependent, responsibility avoidant, conflict averse. They are not looking for partnership. They are looking for relief. Relief from their emotions, relief from accountability, relief from self-regulation. When you are always available, you become that relief. And relief is consumed, not respected. This is why people who are always available often find themselves surrounded by chronic complainers, perpetual victims, indecisive personalities, people who never move forward. These people don't grow with you. They lean on you, and leaning creates imbalance. Another uncomfortable truth: wrong people are drawn to availability because it removes friction. Friction is what filters relationships. When there is no friction, no boundaries, no resistance, anyone can enter your life. But not everyone deserves access. Boundaries are not walls, they are filters. Without filters, your life fills with noise. Constant availability removes all filters. It tells people you don't need effort here, you don't need growth here, you don't need awareness here. And the wrong people respond enthusiastically to that message. This is why people who are always available often feel emotionally exhausted. They are not tired because they give too much. They are tired because they give to those who never reciprocate. Another key psychological mechanism here is asymmetric dependence. When one person is always available and the other is not, dependency forms. Dependency creates entitlement. Entitlement destroys respect. This is why some people become demanding over time. They expect responses, they expect attention, they expect emotional labor. And when it is not given, they feel offended. Not because you wronged them, but because you change the pattern. Patterns create entitlement. When you break the pattern, entitlement reacts. This reaction often confuses people. They think, why are they upset now? I've always been there. Exactly. You taught them to expect it. Another important realization: people who respect themselves are often uncomfortable around those who have no boundaries. Why? Because boundaryless behavior feels unstable. It signals lack of self-protection. It signals lack of discernment. It signals lack of self-priority. Healthy individuals are drawn to clarity, not chaos. They want mutual effort. They want balance. They want structure. When you are always available, you unintentionally repel these people because they sense imbalance before it appears. So while you attract the wrong people, you quietly push away the right ones. This is the invisible cost of availability. Another painful truth: some people stay in your life not because they value you, but because access is easy. The moment access changes, they disappear. And that disappearance hurts, but it is also information. It reveals who was connected to you and who was connected to convenience. Availability hides this difference. Withdrawal reveals it. This is why withdrawing access feels lonely at first, because noise leaves before alignment arrives. But silence is not loss. Silence is clearing. It clears space for healthier connections. It removes emotional parasites. It removes dependency. It removes one-sided dynamics. And what remains is quality. Another important lesson: being selective is not arrogance. It is self-respect. When you stop being always available, you stop being a magnet for those who only take. You begin attracting those who understand effort, who respect limits, who value presence. The most important realization of this part is this: being always available does not make you more loved. It makes you more used. Love grows where there is choice. Respect grows where there is balance. Connection grows where there is structure. And structure begins when availability is intentional. Withdraw access without guilt or drama. Most people don't struggle with boundaries. They struggle with guilt. They know they need space. They know they need limits. They know they are overgiving. But guilt stops them. Guilt whispers, what if they think I don't care? What if they feel hurt? What if I lose them? This guilt does not come from empathy. It comes from conditioning. When you have been always available, others build emotional expectations around you. And when expectations exist, change feels like betrayal, even when it is healthy. This is why withdrawing access feels uncomfortable at first. Not because it is wrong, but because it disrupts a pattern. Patterns create emotional security. Breaking them creates anxiety, both in you and in others. But anxiety is not a signal to stop. It is a signal that adjustment is happening. The first thing you must understand is this: withdrawing access does not require explanation. Explanation invites negotiation. Negotiation invites pressure. Pressure pulls you back into the old pattern. When you explain too much, you are asking for permission to respect yourself. And self-respect never needs permission. Withdrawing access is a behavioral shift, not a conversation. You don't announce it. You don't justify it. You simply act differently. You respond slower. You stop rearranging your life. You stop being emotionally on call. And you do it calmly. Calm is important. Calm signals certainty. Certainty signals strength. If you withdraw access emotionally, people sense fear. If you withdraw access calmly, people sense clarity. Clarity changes behavior. Another critical principle: do not withdraw access suddenly out of resentment. That creates confusion and conflict. Instead, withdraw access consistently. Consistency retrains expectations. People may test at first. They may push. They may question. This is normal. They are not reacting to you. They are reacting to the loss of convenience. Stay calm. Stay consistent. Consistency always wins. Another important realization: you are not responsible for managing other people's emotions. You are responsible for managing your availability. When people feel uncomfortable with your boundaries, they often try to make you feel guilty. They say you've changed, you're distant, you don't care anymore. But what they are really saying is, I no longer have the same access to you. Access loss feels like rejection to those who depended on it. But dependence is not connection. Connection survives boundaries. Dependence resists them. This is how you know which relationships are healthy. Another key technique: replace explanations with patterns. Instead of saying, I'm busy these days, you simply reply later, decline without detail, prioritize selectively. Over time, people adapt, not because they understood, but because behavior forced recalibration. Behavior is always louder than language. Another powerful aspect of withdrawing access is that it restores self-respect internally. Every time you choose yourself, you reinforce internal authority. And internal authority changes how you show up. Your tone changes, your posture changes, your energy changes. People sense this immediately. They may not like it, but they respect it. Another important truth: withdrawing access will shrink your social circle before it strengthens it. This phase is temporary. Noise leaves first, quality arrives later. Do not panic during this phase. Silence is not emptiness, it is alignment in progress. The most important realization of this part is this: guilt is not proof that you are doing something wrong. It is proof that you are breaking an old pattern. Patterns do not break quietly, they resist. But resistance fades when consistency remains. When you withdraw access without drama, without anger, without explanation, you send one of the strongest signals possible. My presence is intentional, and intentional presence is deeply respected. Why withdrawing access changes how people treat you. Human behavior is not driven by words. It is driven by feedback. Every relationship runs on feedback loops, small signals that tell people what works and what doesn't. When you are always available, the feedback loop says, this behavior is acceptable. There is no consequence. There is no adjustment needed. But the moment you withdraw access, the feedback loop breaks, and broken loops force awareness. People suddenly feel uncertainty. They don't know when you will respond, how much access they have, whether their behavior still works. Uncertainty creates attention. Attention creates respect. This is the first and most immediate change people experience. They become more aware of you, not emotionally, psychologically. They start noticing timing. They start noticing tone. They start noticing effort. Because access is no longer automatic. Another key psychological mechanism here is loss aversion. The human brain reacts more strongly to loss than to gain. When access is guaranteed, there is nothing to lose. When access is reduced, the brain registers potential loss, and potential loss triggers behavioral correction. This is why people often start behaving better after you pull back, even if they never admit it. They may respond faster, communicate more clearly, become more polite, show more consideration, not because they suddenly change values, but because the environment changed. Behavior follows environment. Another important shift happens internally. When you withdraw access, you stop over-investing. Over-investment creates imbalance. Imbalance creates devaluation. Balanced investment restores polarity. Polarity creates respect. When effort becomes mutual, connection feels intentional again. This is why relationships often feel healthier after access is regulated. There is less resentment, less exhaustion, less emotional overload, and this internal shift affects your behavior. You speak differently, you listen differently, you decide differently. People feel that difference immediately. Another subtle but powerful change. People stop taking liberties. They stop interrupting you casually, dumping emotions without warning, expecting instant availability, because those behaviors no longer get rewarded. Reward shapes behavior. Removal of reward reshapes it. This is basic behavioral psychology. Another realization many people experience. Some people will disappear. This is not failure. This is filtration. People who are only present for convenience leave when convenience ends. This can feel painful, but it is also clarity. You learn who valued you and who valued access. Withdrawing access reveals truth faster than any conversation ever could. Another important effect, your self-perception improves. When you are no longer constantly available, you feel less reactive. You regain mental space. You regain emotional energy. You regain focus. This internal calm translates outward. Calm presence commands respect. People respond differently to calm than to urgency. Urgency invites exploitation. Calm invites consideration. Another critical truth. Withdrawing access does not guarantee that everyone will treat you better. It guarantees that only the right people remain, and that is far more valuable. The most important realization of this part is this. People don't treat you better because you ask them to. They treat you better because your behavior changed the cost of access. When access has a cost, it is respected. When it has no cost, it is assumed. This is the law of access. And once you understand it, you stop giving yourself away. The difference between withdrawal and disappearing. Many people confuse withdrawal with disappearance, and this confusion creates fear. They think, if I withdraw access, I'll lose everyone. If I stop being available, I'll seem cold. If I pull back, relationships will die. This fear is understandable, but it is based on misunderstanding. Withdrawing access does not mean disappearing. It means redefining availability. Disappearing is emotional avoidance. Withdrawal is emotional regulation. There is a critical difference. When you disappear, you act from resentment. You avoid communication. You create confusion. When you withdraw, you act from clarity. You remain respectful. You create structure. Disappearing is reactive. Withdrawal is intentional. And intention is what people respect. Withdrawal does not mean ignoring people. It means not being constantly accessible. You still respond, you still show up, but you do so selectively. This selectivity changes the dynamic. Another important distinction. Disappearing is silent punishment. Withdrawal is silent recalibration. Punishment seeks reaction. Recalibration seeks balance. When people disappear dramatically, they create emotional instability. Others don't learn boundaries. They feel confused or attacked. But when access is withdrawn calmly, people adapt without drama. They may not like it at first, but they understand it. Because clarity is present even without explanation. Another key difference is emotional availability. When you disappear, you shut down emotionally. When you withdraw, you stay emotionally grounded, but no longer overexposed. You are not cutting people off. You are protecting yourself. Protection is healthy, avoidance is not. This is why emotionally mature people rarely disappear completely. They simply adjust access. They don't answer everything. They don't engage with everything. They don't react to everything. And this restraint is felt as strength. Another important point, withdrawal still allows connection, but only where there is effort. People who value you will notice the change and adjust. They will become more intentional. They will respect timing. They will communicate clearly. People who depended on your availability will resist. They may accuse you of changing. They may test boundaries. They may try to guilt you. This reaction is information. It tells you who was connected to you and who was connected to access. Withdrawal reveals alignment. Disappearing creates confusion. Another subtle but powerful difference. Disappearing creates anxiety. Withdrawal creates respect. Anxiety makes people defensive. Respect makes people reflective. This is why withdrawal changes behavior long-term, while disappearance often damages relationships. One more critical distinction. Withdrawal is sustainable. Disappearance is exhausting. When you disappear, you are constantly managing avoidance. When you withdraw, you are simply living within limits. Limits reduce stress. Avoidance increases it. This is why people who master withdrawal feel calmer, not colder. They are not running from relationships. They are choosing how to engage. The most important realization of this part is this. Withdrawal is not about leaving people. It is about leaving patterns that no longer serve you. You don't need to vanish to be respected. You need to be selectively present. Presence with limits is powerful. Presence without limits is draining. Once people understand that access to you is intentional, not automatic, they adjust. And adjustment is the goal, not isolation. Who stays when access is no longer free? When access becomes intentional, something very revealing happens. People begin to separate themselves, not because you push them away, not because you said anything harsh, not because you created conflict, but because the rules quietly changed. When access was free, everyone could enter your life without effort. When access gains structure, only those willing to adjust remain. This is where clarity begins. People who truly value you do not panic when access changes. They adapt. They become more intentional. They communicate more clearly. They respect timing. They respect energy. They don't demand instant replies. They don't guilt you. They don't question your boundaries. They understand that connection does not require constant access. These people stay, not loudly, not dramatically, but consistently. On the other hand, people who were attached to convenience react very differently. They feel uncomfortable. They feel confused. They feel threatened. Not because they lost you, but because they lost control. Access gave them control. Predictability gave them comfort. Unlimited availability gave them leverage. When that disappears, they feel destabilized. And destabilization reveals intention. Some will test boundaries, some will withdraw, some will accuse you of changing, some will disappear without explanation. This disappearance is not rejection, it is information. It shows you who was connected to you and who was connected to access. This realization can feel painful at first. You may question yourself, you may feel guilty, you may wonder if you were too harsh. But remember this, people who value you do not need unlimited access to stay. They respect limits, they respect space, they respect growth. Another important truth, healthy relationships do not require urgency. They survive pauses, they survive distance, they survive boundaries. Unhealthy relationships rely on constant availability. They need immediate response, they need emotional access, they need reassurance. When that supply ends, they collapse. And collapse reveals dependency. Another subtle realization. Some people don't leave immediately. They linger, they watch, they wait to see if access returns. This is a testing phase. If you remain consistent, they either adjust or quietly fade. Consistency is key. If you withdraw access today and return to over-availability tomorrow, confusion returns. And confusion invites exploitation. But if you remain calm and consistent, clarity settles. Another powerful effect of this phase. Your circle becomes smaller, but stronger. Noise leaves first, alignment follows. You may have fewer conversations, but deeper ones. Fewer connections, but more mutual ones. Less stimulation, but more peace. This is not loss. This is refinement. Another difficult but necessary realization. Some people were never meant to grow with you. They were meant to benefit from you. When growth begins, benefit-based connections fall away. And that is not something to fix. It is something to accept. Because holding on to people who only stay when access is free will always cost you self-respect. Another truth most people avoid. Being selective feels lonely at first. Because your nervous system was used to constant engagement. Silence feels unfamiliar. But unfamiliar does not mean wrong. It means new. And new always feels quiet before it feels right. The most important realization of this part is this. When access is no longer free, only those who truly value you remain. And those people don't demand your availability. They respect your boundaries. They respect your growth. They respect you. How to stay calm when people react to your boundaries. The moment you change your availability, reactions begin. Not from everyone, but from those who are most comfortable with the old version of you. These reactions can be subtle or intense. Confusion, guilt-tripping, silence, passive comments, sudden emotional distance. And if you are not prepared, these reactions can pull you back into the very pattern you were. Trying to break. This is why calm is not optional. It is essential. The first thing to understand is this. Other people's reactions are not evidence that you are wrong. They are evidence that the dynamic has changed. When someone reacts emotionally to your boundaries, they are not reacting to the boundary itself. They are reacting to the loss of control, the loss of predictability, the loss of access. And loss triggers emotion, not logic, not maturity, emotion. If you try to reason with emotion, you lose ground. Because emotional reactions are not looking for clarity, they are looking for comfort. And if you provide that comfort, the boundary collapses. This is why calm presence matters. Calm is grounding. Calm communicates certainty. Calm ends negotiation. When you stay calm, you send a powerful message. This decision is settled. No argument, no debate, no emotional charge, just steadiness. Another critical point. Do not match their emotional intensity. When people escalate, they are testing whether emotion still works. If you respond with urgency, explanation, or defensiveness, you confirm that it does. But when you remain calm, emotion has nowhere to go. It burns out on its own. This is not cruelty. This is emotional hygiene. Another common trap is over-justifying. People react, and you feel the urge to explain, to clarify, to soften, to reassure. But reassurance teaches, push harder next time. Boundaries that require reassurance are boundaries that will be tested again. Instead of explaining, anchor yourself in pattern consistency. You don't need to convince. You need to remain predictable. Predictable boundaries become accepted boundaries. Another important realization: you are not responsible for how others process change. You are responsible for how consistently you maintain it. Some people need time to adjust, some never do. Both outcomes are acceptable. Adjustment is not owed, it is optional. Another psychological skill here is emotional detachment without emotional withdrawal. This means you remain respectful, you remain kind, you remain grounded, but you do not absorb their emotions. You let them have their reaction without taking it personally. This is difficult, especially for empathetic people. But empathy without boundaries becomes self-abandonment. Healthy empathy says, I understand how you feel, but I am not changing my decision. This balance is powerful. Another truth most people miss: boundaries reveal emotional maturity. Those with maturity may feel discomfort, but they adjust. Those without maturity escalate. Escalation is not strength, it is loss of regulation. When you remain calm, you expose the difference. And exposure creates clarity. Another critical technique: use time as an ally. You do not need to respond immediately to emotional reactions. Delay reduces intensity. Distance restores perspective. Immediate response rewards escalation. Calm delay encourages self-regulation. This is why emotionally grounded people rarely rush responses. They understand that time filters emotion. Another realization: some people will try to pull you back by reminding you of the past. You weren't like this before. You used to be available. You've changed. This is not an observation. It is a request for the old pattern. You do not need to argue with this. Growth always looks like change to those who benefited from stagnation. You don't need to defend evolution. You need to continue it. The most important realization of this part is this: calm is not passive. Calm is controlled strength. When you stay calm, you keep your authority. When you react emotionally, you hand it away. Boundaries do not require force. They require consistency and calm presence. And once people realize that emotion no longer moves you, their behavior changes. Not instantly, but inevitably. The identity shift. Why people start seeing you differently when access changes. When you withdraw access, People don't just notice a behavioral change. They experience an identity shift. Before, you were predictable, reachable, emotionally available on demand, and predictability creates a role. That role may have been the listener, the fixer, the emotional support, the one who always understands. This role defined how people saw you, not who you were, but what you were to them. When you change access, that role collapses. And when a role collapses, identity must be reassessed. This is why people suddenly say, "You've changed. You're different now. You're not like before." They are not commenting on your personality. They are reacting to the loss of a role they had assigned to you. And role loss is psychologically destabilizing. Human beings don't attach only to people, they attach to functions. When you fulfilled a function reliably, people felt secure. When that function disappears, they feel uncertainty. And uncertainty forces reevaluation. This reevaluation is where power shifts. Before withdrawal, your identity was passive. You are always there. After withdrawal, your identity becomes intentional. You choose when to be there. Choice changes perception. People respect choice more than availability. This is why selective individuals are often seen as more confident, even if they say very little. Their presence feels deliberate. Deliberate presence signals self-awareness. Self-awareness signals authority. Authority reshapes identity. Another critical psychological mechanism here is status reassignment. When access is free, status is assumed. When access is limited, status is questioned. People ask themselves, why is this person less available? What changed? Do I need to adjust how I interact? These questions elevate your perceived status, not because you demanded it, but because your behavior required it. This is also why respect often appears after silence. Not immediately, not emotionally, but cognitively. People need time to update their internal model of you. And during this update, they become more careful. Carefulness is the beginning of respect. Another important realization: identity shifts are uncomfortable, especially for those who benefited from your old role. They may resist, they may test, they may try to pull you back. This is not personal. It is psychological inertia. The mind prefers familiar roles, but familiarity does not equal health. Growth always disrupts identity assignments, and disruption feels threatening to those who relied on stability. Another subtle effect of identity shift is reversed evaluation. Before, people evaluated you based on availability. How fast do they respond? How much do they give? After withdrawal, evaluation changes. When do they choose to engage? What do they tolerate? What do they walk away from? This new evaluation frame is far more respectful. It places you in a position of agency, not service. Another key truth: you cannot control how people reassign your identity. Some will elevate it, some will resist it, some will walk away. All outcomes are correct, because identity alignment always costs something. But what it gives you in return is clarity. You stop being everyone's solution and become someone's choice. Choice is powerful. Choice is respected. Another important realization: once identity shifts, returning to old patterns becomes costly. If you withdraw access, gain respect, and then return to over-availability, confusion returns. And confusion erodes authority. This is why consistency after withdrawal is crucial. You are not just changing behavior. You are stabilizing a new identity. And identities require reinforcement. Reinforcement comes from repetition, from choosing limits again and again, from staying selective under pressure, from resisting guilt-driven access. This is where many people fail. They withdraw, feel the shift, then retreat back to familiarity. And familiarity erases progress. But when you stay consistent, the new identity solidifies. People stop questioning. They stop testing. They stop assuming. Your presence becomes intentional in their mind. And intentional presence is deeply respected. The most important realization of this part is this: withdrawing access does not make you distant. It makes you defined. And definition is what gives identity strength. Once your identity shifts from always available to selectively present, everything changes. Not because you became someone else, but because you finally became intentional, becoming selectively unavailable. At some point, the lesson becomes clear, not intellectually, but emotionally. You realize that being always available was never about love or loyalty or kindness. It was about fear of being misunderstood, fear of being replaced, fear of being forgotten. And once you see this, you understand something powerful. Availability was never your strength. It was your habit, and habits can be changed. Becoming selectively unavailable is not about disappearing from the world. It is about choosing where your energy goes. It is about deciding who has access to your time, who earns your emotional presence, who respects your boundaries. Selective unavailability is clarity in action. You no longer respond to everything. You no longer explain everything. You no longer engage with everything. And for the first time, your life begins to feel lighter. Not emptier, clearer. This is where peace enters. Peace does not come from being needed. It comes from being aligned. Aligned with your limits, aligned with your values, aligned with your self-respect. When you stop being always available, you stop living reactively. You stop letting other people's urgency define your priorities. You stop outsourcing your time, your focus, your emotional space. And something subtle but powerful happens. People adjust, not because you asked them to, not because you explained yourself, not because you demanded respect. They adjust because your behavior no longer invites assumption. Your silence becomes intentional. Your presence becomes measured. Your engagement becomes meaningful. And meaning creates respect. This is the final shift. You stop chasing validation and start protecting alignment. You stop proving your worth and start honoring it. You stop asking, why do people treat me like this? And you start living in a way that answers the question for them. Some people will fall away, some will grow closer, some will watch quietly from a distance. Let them. Your job is not to keep everyone comfortable. Your job is not to stay accessible at all costs. Your job is not to explain your evolution. Your job is to remain consistent. Consistency is what turns boundaries into identity. Identity is what shapes behavior. Behavior is what teaches people how to treat you. And once people understand that access to you is intentional, not automatic, everything changes. You don't become cold, you become clear. You don't lose connection, you lose exploitation. You don't isolate yourself, you refine your world. This is what it means to become selectively unavailable. Not distant, not arrogant, not detached, but grounded. And grounded people are always respected.